Kick them all around. Good morning, Jason Marlowe. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself, sir?
I'm good. This is John Dingfelder. You're listening to Down and Dirty. Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down.
We are kicking lots of people in various states of being upright or not.
There you go. No, we're not. We'll try not to kick too hard today, but there's always a little bit of that in Down and Dirty. It's WMNF 88.5. We'll be taking your calls, 813-239-9663, probably in about the next 10 or 15 minutes. And we are glad to be here on this actually pretty nice Friday afternoon.
Isn't that a nice change of pace?
Yeah, except for that Bucks loss.
Yeah,
oh, God, that was painful. I am so tired. I was like so excited we were going to win the game, and then
still leading the division at 3-2.
Yeah, that was a tough loss.
That was a tough loss. I mean,
what's his name? Kirk Cousins. He kicked our.
You like that? Yeah, that's like his catchphrase now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he stormed. I think we were up like 21 on him when he was a commander, and yeah, he beat us. He rallied back and screamed, "You like that?" That's now his catchphrase.
Oh, so he's got our number.
Yeah, he has our number. Like truly, he really does.
Well, this is not a sports radio talk show, but we can go there every now and then. We are so pleased to have a very special guest today, Ashley Brundage. Good morning, Ashley.
Hey, good morning. How's everyone out there?
Well, we're hanging in there. I hope folks are drying out. We give our sincere sympathies to people who got flooded. All over the Bay Area. Boy, I mean, you can't even, we'd spend an hour naming all the little places and towns and islands. And
well, I mean, listen, it brings our topic, our guest into relevancy because it's her district that is really taking borne the brunt of the damage, at least here locally. South Tampa, Port Tampa, Palmetto Beach, just absolutely
Dana Shores.
Davis Island. I mean, to my understanding, Davis Island was under
Did you go down there yet?
I haven't. So Lynn
and I drove around Davis Island a couple of days ago. I think we had to go over to TGH with my mom or something. But anyway, we drove around Davis Island and it looks like a war zone. The barrier islands look like war zones. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Storm that missed us, by the way.
Yeah,
missed us.
Yeah,
sure.
Ashley Brundage, good morning. Ashley, we're going to go into a little bit of your history in a few minutes, but let's talk about what you're running for and probably why.
Yeah.
What are you running for?
I'm running for the Florida State House of Representatives, District 65, which is South Tampa. And it's here in Hillsborough County. We have all the waterfront areas you were just talking about, Hyde Park, downtown, Soho, West Shore, Bay Shore, and then out and all the way out to Town and Country, parts of the west part of Town and Country near the coast.
Do you still have that
West
Riverview
Chase
area?
No.
Okay, that's
no. That's a different, different part. And I'm running for the State House of Representatives, and I'm running to address the property insurance crisis, which exponentially just got a lot harder for every single person listening out there. And if you think that, going with the status quo is going to help you, my opponent voted for a $1 billion bailout for the insurance industry with no accountability attached. And then she followed that up with a vote to eliminate any kind of your ability to recoup any kind of legal fees. If you have to fight your insurance company, you have to pay everything because of the tort reform that she also passed. So, this current moment is a really tough moment in time for everybody. And your vote and your voice with your vote is the power that you hold come November 5th.
And what is that district number that you're running for?
65.
65.
Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about insurance. It's been a mess. Any of us who own property, have seen our insurance rates go up. If you've got rental property, your insurance rates are going up, and therefore your price to your tenants, your rent price to your tenants is going to go up because you have to pass that on.
Yeah.
And so this is not just hurting rich people or people who own houses. It's hurting everybody, including the tenants.
I think you could make a legitimate case. I mean, listen, public education and infrastructure are serious challenges that the state of Florida is facing. But in a state that is so hyper-dependent upon growth, right? We need people to move here. We need them to move here every single day. That's what sustains so many of the industries here, be it construction or real estate. I think the home insurance crisis is probably the single greatest issue hemming in the future of the state of Florida right now, because to your point, it makes it that much more impossible for renters to find remotely affordable rents. It makes it that much more challenging for landlords to find ways to be profitable by offering their properties to other folks. It's going to stop development. I mean, folks are going to be less inclined to develop single-family housing here if they think the market is not going to support it because consumers aren't as interested as a result of these costs. And to piggyback on your point, there was this 60-minute story on the 29th in relationship to homeowners struggling to even get relief from Hurricane Ian. Mm-hmm. Now, years later, the company Heritage Insurance was apparently very illegally changing the work of their own underwriters and basically telling homeowners who had been underwritten for like $230,000, here's $18,000.
Wow. Sue us. And basically they argue to say, hey, I dare them to hire a lawyer and sue them and fight an insurance company, knowing that you are going to have to come out of all those legal fees. And that's just absolutely wretched.
No, I mean, I think this state particular, right, has survived on being a low-wage but low-cost state. You got by in Florida because a slice of the American dream was achievable for a perception of a fraction of the cost of what it might be in the Northeast or California.
Because you're not paying state taxes.
And that's gone. I mean, we are now really a low-wage, high-cost state, whether it goes to the cost of housing, gasoline, keeping your energy on with the air conditioning, because it's 96 degrees for 7 months a year. I mean, this is no longer a cheap state. And I think people are only now coming to the realization that they bought into a pipe dream. So I think there are a lot of folks over the last 5 years, particularly in the post-COVID environment, who bought into Florida and are now realizing they purchased a pipe dream.
Well, and also just really quickly, I want to mention this for listeners. You're thinking about who to vote for. I want people to know that I rent. So literally, I rent south of Gandy, here in South Tampa, and so if you're listening in that space, I'm one of the people who are disproportionately affected, not as a property owner. I used to own property, but I don't currently. And so I think it's really important to understand that this definitely affects people, and it's everyday people who are not typically elected to the State House of Representatives. I mean, this is the kind of moment that we have where we can actually send a huge message that we're not going to elect the same typical ivory tower kind of person who is usually the person that we elect in this office.
Ashley, let me ask you this, because people have asked me over the years, like, okay, John, you did, city council and you took a shot at county commission and blah, 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 local government. Why don't you go to Tallahassee? And one of the reasons that I really never,
I got a good reason. No such hive of scum and villainy has ever been seen or heard of such as Tallahassee before.
Well, no, I mean, the reality is I think that Democrats for the last 20 years have been extremely frustrated because you go up there and you're going to be in the minority.
Super minority.
Yes. What are the numbers in the House right now?
Yeah. So right now the Democrats need to take five seats and protect all their other seats, and then they can actually break the supermajority. And so what happens?
It'll just be a majority.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, it's a big difference because,
God,
right?
Why?
Well, because right now, if you ask your state legislator to write an insurance reform bill, and your state legislator just happens to be a Democrat, what's going to end up happening is they can't do that. They actually procedurally cannot write a bill to address the legal industry reform needed to be able to get some of your fees recouped.
You can't write a bill.
They can't present a bill.
Minority.
And the super minority, you cannot propose a piece of legislation.
It doesn't even get heard.
It won't get heard. You have to have a Republican to sponsor it, or it won't be heard.
Okay.
And so getting out of the supermajority enables both parties to work together. I'm not trying to come with some newfangled idea that's literally going to be something that no one's ever heard of. It's called bipartisanship.
Well, that's interesting procedural nuance that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between supermajority and majority, it's pathetic that we're like.
I mean, that's just some sort of Florida rule, I take it.
It was like Florida man.
Yeah. So what other issues are near and dear to your heart? I was looking at your website. You speak to public schools. What's the shape of public schools in your opinion, Ashley Brundage?
Well, I mean, I think that we have to have someone in the state office in this role who has had their kids across all the different types of public schools. I love the ability that I got as a parent, and I have two kids. They're now 19 and 17.
You made it.
Yeah,
congratulations.
I mean, well, I got my youngest is a senior, so there's that.
Well, you're close.
Yeah, but seeing the different types of schools from VPK to the public school to public-private partnerships to charter schools. Literally, I've had my kids to private. I've had my older son in a private school, religious-based private school. Literally, my kids have gone to every type of school, so I've seen them all. And so, do you
support charter schools? Because I'll tell you what, personally, as a product of public schools, Jason, you're a product of public schools.
Public schools, taught at public school.
Yeah, me too. Personally, the charter school thing scares me because it seems to me that in Tallahassee, they've been taking a lot of the money that traditionally went to public schools and taking it elsewhere. And does that hurt public schools? So
absolutely.
You sound a little more open-minded on the issue, Ashley.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think that we have to listen and we have to use experience. And so because my kids have gone to all these types of schools, I have such a unique experience in this space. I prefer my kids being in public schools because of the connection that they've had. But then we went to a public-private partnership, Rampello Downtown Partnership School. Mm-hmm. And that school was actually one of the best schools we had our kids in.
Heard good things about that.
So, I think it really depends, and this goes back to oversight. Right? Like we give money to programs, to organizations, and sometimes as a state, we give money to corporations. And do we actually hold them accountable or not? And I have a history of holding corporations accountable. Just ask PNC Bank, where I worked for 11 years, and I was a registered investment advisor. I specialized in risk mitigation and portfolio diversification, and then I became their national vice president for the bank in charge of an employee engagement and leadership development program for 60,000 employees. Wow. And so I helped to rewrite their benefit for the 60,000 benefit programs for the 60,000 employees. I've held that corporation accountable for the PNC Political Action Committee giving levels, which were at the first time I looked 90% to Republicans and 10% to Democrats. So I have this experience that's going to be such an amazing experience for Tallahassee.
So, Jason, reproductive rights is a big hot issue.
Amendment 4.
Amendment 4. Locally in Florida, nationally, it's a hot button issue for everybody. We heard a lot of it during both debates recently. Ashley, what's your position on that?
Yeah, so I'm voting yes on 4. I think that we should get the government out of making decisions about people and their lives. This is a catch-all for our campaign.
Now, for folks who don't know, what did Tallahassee do on this issue over the last year?
Yeah, so they passed a draconian 6-week abortion ban.
How's that work?
And so basically, me and my ex, we had 2 kids. We found out right around week 5 and week 6, and so had we wanted to have an abortion, we wouldn't have really been able to do that because you would have to get an appointment and do all that stuff in that time frame. So basically, it doesn't give anyone any options to make their own decisions. Your state legislator shouldn't be making any decisions about anything to do with your own body. We should allow people to discuss that with their medical professionals, their family, their God, whoever it is that they want to discuss it with. That's who they should choose because that's their choice. And I'm a big proponent of that. Now, do I want someone murdering babies? No, I don't think that also doesn't make a lot of sense either.
Was that what Amendment 4 allows?
No, I've read it. I read it very clear to me. It enables around Roe v. Wade levels, and basically it brings Florida back to enacting at the Roe v. Wade levels. And I'm endorsed by Ruth's List. So for those that are wondering, I mean, I'm being supported by their organization. You can go and find all the financial reporting on any candidate. I challenge people to go there all the time and see who's giving who money.
Let me ask you, speaking of endorsements, Jason, I see you got a question. I spoke to your opponent the other day, and I think she's going to be on with us next week, Karen Gonzalez Pittman. She said she got union endorsements.
And so have I. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're sort of splitting the union endorsements?
Yeah.
What did you get?
She has fire and police.
Yes. And I
thought she said
I have SEIU, a union endorsement. And then I'm working with a couple.
Did she get Central Labor or teachers who got... No?
No.
Okay.
I'm not certain. But I know that I'm also working with a couple of other unions to finalize a couple other union endorsements because I'm going to be pro-union. She voted to remove heat protections for workers. She voted to remove child labor law restrictions benefiting corporations. I mean, anyone can ask her about that. Her position is not great. Her position isn't also great for reproductive rights either. She voted to pay for anti-abortion propaganda with your tax dollars. So, I mean, her positions are pretty much all out there. You can read them right there on the state websites and see what she voted for.
You seem to be fairly passionate about small businesses.
Yes.
What do you have a personal background in small business, or? I mean, you mentioned big corporation, but
well, when I worked in the banking industry, the first 4.5 years I worked there was in the branches. Working as a banker, and then a business banker, and an investment banker.
Work your way up.
And a mortgage banker. And then that's when I became a registered investment advisor, specializing in risk mitigation and portfolio diversification. But when I worked with the businesses, and especially lots of businesses in the Tampa Bay area, I would work incredibly hard to build relationships with the business owners and help them understand how to grow their business, increase their receivables, lower cost. Those were all things that I did. And it's all built up to what I do nationally for my own company now, where I help businesses understand how to actually measure their employee engagement.
All right.
That's
what
I do.
If you're just
for work.
tuning in, you're listening to WMNF Down and Dirty. This is John Dingfelder. I'm joined with Jason Marlowe, and our special guest today is Ashley Brundage, who is running for State House District 65. I got it right. And if you have any questions for Ashley or want to join the conversation, give us a call, 813-239-9663. We've only got her for a couple more minutes, and then she has to run elsewhere. But Jason, what's up?
So I was going to ask, what's it like running against? I wouldn't call her entrenched, but I would call her an incumbent. And
she's only been in 2 years.
But looking at her finance reports, $255,000 just about raised, 46 of that in kind, basically coming from the Republican, Party of Florida, local chair, local party, et cetera. So can you tell the listeners, what is it like? What's your experience been like running against somebody who, you're not going to be able to go dollar for dollar with her, right? I'm curious, could you tell our listeners sort of what that experience has been like? I guess having to raise the money, working to raise the money. For those who don't work in politics, me and John are more than well aware how excruciating the process can be of trying to extract dollars on the campaign trail. And I was
What's interesting about this seat for folks who've been around a while is I think of this as the Jim Davis seat. Mm-hmm. Jim Davis was our state rep, and then he of course became our congressman. But Jim had this seat. It's obviously changed and morphed over the years.
Significantly. And it's had a lot of good candidates in between then. David Singer, Deborah Belanti, Julie Jenkins, Jen McDonald have all run for this seat.
Tried for this seat.
Yeah, they all tried and they lost, yes.
To Jackie Toledo and then Karen Gonzalez Pittman in 22.
And Dana Young. Dana Young had it before.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, God.
Did Jackie term out? Or?
No, Jackie ran for Congress.
That's
she
right.
finished a distant third.
She threw the dice. So anyway, Ashley, Jason asked you.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we're not going to be raising the kind of money that that the Republicans are throwing at this. I mean, for crying out loud, my opponent has sent out mailers, and this week alone, likening me to a Cat 5 level financial Hurricane Ashley, which I think is absolutely tasteless and classless. I think it's utterly ridiculous. While people in the district are actually suffering from an actual hurricane and losing everything.
Oh, well, that's Anthony Pedicini for you. That's Sim Wins who's doing that work. So, let's be real clear to identify.
But you got to control your consultant.
Yeah,
next week,
good luck with that.
Next week, if she comes on, we'll ask her about that.
Yeah, I think it. But you know what? To me, go ahead. I mean, I purposely did not remove any of my photos from my social media. I looked at all of them, and that was one of the photos. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm wearing a bikini here. You know what? And it's funny. I was at a charity event at the Stratosphere Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, raising money for an national organization, and it was a poolside party. So, you know, I know where I was. I know what I was doing during their photo use of where I am now in a hurricane, and they want to talk about my financial background. It's pretty evident. When you overcome harassment, discrimination, and a year and a half of homelessness, you don't freaking get to be homeless without actually losing your freaking home. So I have actually lost my freaking home before. So Karen will never know what that feels like. So she's not ever going to earn your vote and understand what it's like to lose everything. I actually know what that feels like, and I experience that kind of experience every single day of my life.
Now you have thousands of potential constituents
who've lost their home,
experiencing the same thing,
who have actually lost their actual home.
All right, we have a call. We have a call coming in. Irene is answering the call, so we'll take it in 1 second, hopefully. Well, let's talk about hurricanes, and specifically the last topic in your website speaks to climate and climate change. I mean, we're just Florida. What can we do about climate change?
I mean, I think that we have some of the most smartest people. I mean, Tampa Bay is a center of innovation, and there is so much that we can do out there in this world by utilizing our own technology and our own resources. I mean, we need to be so much smarter about this, and there are climate-related jobs that we can invest in. I just think...
Couldn't we help the planet by having solar, much more solar?
Yeah.
We are the Sunshine State.
I mean, we are producing a lot more solar, but then let's also realize that somehow our energy costs are getting higher and higher and higher. I don't understand that.
Don't tell solar panels to Jimmy Petronas, because he's had her claiming that solar panels on your roof are why the home insurance crisis is there, because it's raising your rates because they have to deal with the insurance on the solar panels.
All right. Tom was waiting. And Tom dropped off.
We lost you, Tom.
Oh,
lost you, Tom. Well, Ashley, I know you need to be elsewhere, and we've got our next person calling in is Bob Enriquez.
Oh my gosh, Coach!
And Coach Bob is hopefully calling in the next few minutes to talk about Bob is the Hillsborough County property appraiser, and he's going to talk about what these storms and what this particular storm will do to your taxes.
Yeah.
Will your taxes go up? Will your taxes go down?
There was a very interesting conversation at Tampa City Council yesterday in which City Council was going to be, they're going to wait for the property appraiser's office to do their due diligence and get things in order. But the City of Tampa is going to eventually do some interagency inquiries as to how that storm is going to affect local property taxes. Because a lot of the most valuable real estate here in the city, it's now going to be demolished, who knows, rebuilt. I mean, for certain areas along the water, I don't even know if you rebuild there, to be candid. I mean, I think to Ashley's point earlier, I think if we're going to solve some of these climate issues here in Florida, I think part of it has to start with us having a sense of responsibility about where we build and where we don't.
Yeah, I think that that's a big part of how we get better, is we have to realize what we've done wrong, and we have to utilize people who are experts in this space. I'm not a climate expert, so why we shouldn't expect people to do that. We should surround ourselves with people who are experts in this space. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a call?
I think we've got Bob Enriquez on the line.
Look at
Bob,
that.
can you hear us?
I can indeed. How are you?
All right.
Good. You're a little bit faint. I know you're driving back from Jacksonville. Would you have meetings up there?
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Good. Okay.
A little bit better. I know you're not a soft-spoken guy, so go ahead and bellow it out, Bob. Pretend you're on the field and you're yelling at linemen or something like that.
Yeah, we got the Property Appraisers Association meetings up in Jacksonville headed back now, so it was a good chance for us to kind of compare and contrast what we're all going through and those kinds of things, and some folks that have been through it more recently. So
yeah,
it was a good opportunity.
So we're just finishing up with Ashley Brundage. Ashley, say hello to Bob.
Hey, Coach. How are you?
Hey, Ashley. How are you?
Fantastic.
And we've been talking, obviously, about a lot of related issues, including the storm and insurance and property values and that sort of thing. Ashley, if you want to stick around, I don't know exactly what your appointments are, but you're more than welcome. If you got to go, we understand. Bob Enriquez is Hillsborough County property appraiser. And Bob, how many years you been in that office now?
Well, I'm finishing up my third term, so it'll be 12 years in January.
All right. You do have an opponent. You will be on the ballot in the next couple of weeks?
I do indeed.
All right. And there's Jason Marlowe.
Yeah, I mean, so Bob, talk to us a little bit about, what your office has been doing in the aftermath of the storm to try to identify, I guess, the consequences on property here in Hillsborough County. And I guess, tell folks a little bit about what your experience has been on now your, is this your fifth or sixth campaign, including State House?
Gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. I guess it would be my...
Bob Enriquez served West Tampa as the state representative for West Tampa for, I think, 3 or 4 terms as well.
4 terms, 8 years. I was termed out 98 to 2006. So I guess it's actually my 8th campaign, right? So
8th?
Pretty, yeah.
Wow, you got me beat. I only did 6.
Look at you, lifers.
So, Bob, on a serious note...
How many more I have in me.
Yeah. On a serious note, a lot of people are suffering out there. A lot of people have lost all their worldly possessions. Their homes are a total mess. They're peeling drywall off their walls. They're dragging rugs out to the street. What is that going to do to that individual's, the value of that individual's home, the actual value, and perhaps from your perspective, the appraised value of their homes, and how are you guys going to address this? And that's going to be a massive undertaking for you to get out there and see and assess the situation.
Well, first of all, back to Jason's question, we in these cases, it starts with there's different phases when you have a disaster. So we're just now sort of touching on the recovery phase, and so there are initial damage assessments that are done for various different federal declarations and those kinds of things, and so that gives us a bit of a roadmap as to where the damage is. We have a sense just from past events, smaller events of the areas that are most likely to have had issues. Now, obviously, in this case, we know that Davis Island and some areas of South County, Apollo Beach. In particular, Palmetto Beach, parts of Town and Country, those are the areas that are maybe greatly affected.
Hillsborough, up the Hillsborough River.
Along the Hillsborough River, literally within a block of my house. So we're on it. We're in the initial phases. You don't want to have our field folks out there getting in the way of folks that are still trying to recover and all the stuff that's going on. We have probably the tool that we would use for reporting the most is actually an online reporting tool in which folks would actually contact us and fill out a damage assessment form that we have.
What's that website, Bob?
So it's actually Helene Damage at hcpafl.org.
HCPA, Hillsborough County Property Appraisers FL. HCPAFL is that's the
org.
Right, that's the basic place to go, and then look for Helene Damage.
Yes, and if you go on our website, the hcpafl.org, just our regular website, you'll see there's a rotator there with the thing to click on to actually go into to report damage. You can also call us. We actually created a damage hotline. If you can take that number, it's 813-272-6332, and then you can talk to an actual human or report the damage, and we'll get back with you. And that's going to give us a pretty good sense that, as we going forward, as people start to do repairs, we'll see those, and hopefully and realistically, they have to pull permits to do those kinds of things, or they should, and that way we would know where the repairs and the status of those repairs are. And then we're also in concert with the local authorities, so they're doing damage assessment and getting reports, and they'll send us the information that they're from what they're doing out in the field for the declaration. So we'll have a pretty good sense of the numbers.
Now, Bob, were your peers from the surrounding counties that got impacted, especially Pasco and Pinellas and Hernando, and then of course further up the coast, probably outside of our listening area, but those other counties, were they there at the conference with you, and are they setting up some similar types of response, would you guess?
Yeah, depending on the level of effects that they had. Some of the folks in the Panhandle were not there. They had all three effects, obviously, of the of not just the in our case the surge, but obviously there's areas up in the Panhandle and what have you that they're affected with storm surge as well as the wind as well as
But Pinellas obviously, I think Pinellas might have it the worst, or I'm not sure about Pasco.
Pasco not well either. But let me ask you, Bob. So, like yesterday at City Council, they were discussing the potentiality of how much damage.
Well, they're worried about revenue. I mean, isn't that what they were talking about?
That too, but they estimated the city of Tampa's losses at roughly just about $600 million. And I was curious if you guys at the property appraiser's office have a more like holistic or a number in mind for what the damage we're looking at on a county level is.
Not yet. I mean, the numbers we have preliminarily are in that same range, $500 to $600 million in the city, and somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion. Those were the initial numbers they came out with, again, to send to the feds to get the declarations. So somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion. It probably will be higher than that. I would assume. But it's very fluid, and from the standpoint of property values, it's difficult to tell because it all depends. Remember, your property taxes are based on the assessment as of January 1st of a given year. So if you have X amount of damage, but you have it repaired before January 1st of 2025, then it wouldn't reflect for next year's assessment. Mm-hmm. So there may be that much damage, but there may not be that much damage as of the time that the assessments come out.
Well, Bob, let's talk about the flip side. Let's talk about the flip side of that, because Lynn and I drove out on Davis Island the other day, and there's a lot of one story, half of Davis Island is still one story homes, just like it's always been.
Yeah, those are the most affected.
Right. One story homes since the 50s and 60s. Cinder block houses, had a nice assessment. Maybe they were, I don't know what they were paying, let's say $5,000, $10,000 of taxes. Now those homes, let's say to generalize, are not habitable. I very much doubt, a lot of those folks are not going to repair them because I think they're going to be afraid to repair them and move back in.
Well, they may not even be able to repair them. And so there's a couple things at play here, John. The first is, remember, in those cases, so much of the value is in the land, not necessarily the structure. If it's one of the older houses that, and obviously the majority of the neighborhood has, over the course of time, you've got the newer big, mansions there.
Sure.
So that may not affect them to the extent that you'd think. And then the other thing is, because of the FEMA 50% rule, that's probably the thing that's going to come into play more, and something that needs to be probably discussed. But it's a federal rule that if your depreciated market value, if the repairs cost more than 50%, then you have to then bring everything up to code.
Right, and here's an example, because I've been through this. If your home, not the dirt, but your home was worth let's say $200,000 with improvements and what have you. If your repairs exceed $100,000, then you have to elevate everything up to the 12-foot level. Isn't that the way? Am I misspeaking?
Yeah, everything. You have to bring everything up to code, so your electrical and what have you. So so then at that point, it's more economical just to raise it and then rebuild it. So there's going to be a lot of that going on, and the law points folks to our values. But what we encourage folks to do, it also allows you to get a private appraiser to do it, because it's more than likely that a private appraiser's number, may be better in terms of giving you more wiggle room for the 50% rule.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Jason has a quick question, but let me finish that one by saying I believe, as I was driving around, that the dirt value in a lot of these areas is going to drop because there's going to be so much dirt available. Previously, a lot of people didn't want to sell. They wanted to finish out their last 15, 20 years in that house where they raised their kids. Life was good. But now as I drive around Davis Island, and I'm sure it's pretty similar in the other areas we talked about, that dirt value is going to drop because I don't think there's going to be as much competition for it. But anyway, I guess that time will tell on that. Jason, you had a question.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask,
that's the realtor in you.
Well, I know few people know the city of Tampa better than Coach, and I mean, I know 3 or 4 generations here in the city. 5. All right. So yes, like I said, nobody knows the city of Tampa better than Coach. So let me ask you this: when you say $2 billion in damage in the county and $600 million in the city, can you give listeners an idea of how unprecedented that is within your own personal anecdotal experience? Have you ever seen or experienced anything here in the area that's remotely tantamount to what we've just sort of gone through?
No, and I think the initial was about $2 billion total thereabouts, but those numbers are probably going to go up. So. At this point, we don't know. No, in my lifetime, certainly not. We had, we've had various different events, but nothing. It was always predicted, and I was a damage assessment coordinator for the county in a former life, and it was always predicted that if we had a Category 3, which the common thinking back, 25, 30 years ago was that because in history since 1921, when the last direct hit that we had, which was Category 3, but because of the circumstances where we're located and the way storms would have to be steered, that generally they get sheared and lose some strength, that nothing stronger than a Category 3 could hit us. And now I think we probably need to rethink that between Charlie and all the others that we've had that have strengthened right before making landfall. But it was always predicted, even then, when they had what we call the slosh models and different modeling, that a Category 3, which basically we got Category 3, we're very close to it, surge, but Davis Island would be underwater. And there was talk at one time of moving Tampa General Hospital as a result of that being the Level 1 trauma center. And now if you wanted to buy stock, you probably should buy it in whatever that thing is they put around it that didn't allow the water in.
Aqua Wall, I think
that was amazing.
It was really
I saw it in person.
It was really cool.
Going up, yeah.
I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to talk about a little bit just this idea of I think so many folks who live on the coast, right? I think they know that this risk comes, but to points that we were talking about prior, I think a lot of folks who were living by the river really did not have an understanding as to how the storm surge was going to be coming right up into their homes potentially.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. And like I said, I'm in Wellswood, close to Tampa Catholic there, and we're just outside the flood zone, so we were fine. But other than losing our power for a bit of time, but just literally a block and a half away, there were homes that were just like Davis Island that were underwater. So it's amazing. And again, we talk in terms of value and numbers, that obviously the value of property is so much higher now than it was in previous events. But I'm not aware that we've had this level of flooding, certainly in my lifetime.
I think when I was a kid, Hurricane Donna, I think that was 1960, probably a little bit before you were born, Bob, but my recollection was not a recollection. I was only 4, but what I've heard. Yes, I was studying these things, Jason.
Colors, shapes, floods. I'm on top of it.
What I've heard from my parents and older siblings is that was a big flood event, especially in the Hillsborough River.
Really?
And as a result, it was one of the impetuses to actually build the bypass canal to make sure that the river, didn't flood. Now, back then, the river flooded from the upside. They had to open the dams, and the river flooded over the dam and down into the city. So that's why they built the bypass. In this case, the bypass couldn't be of any assistance because the water was coming the other direction. Right, Bob?
No, that's right. And I grew up in Forest Hills, and I know that around that time, in the early 60s, again, a little bit before my time, but I was told to be no fact-checking here. So,
did you bring your eyeliner?
I'm not going to go there. But there was significant flooding from, but in those cases it was usually, long-term rain events and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware that we've had this kind of surge, at least since 1921.
No.
So.
Andy Johnson, WTVT retired meteorologist, and he's still at it. But I think he reported the other night on Thursday that 1921 was the comparable event. This was the 100-year storm. The scary part is how many more 100-year storms are going to come in our lifetime.
Yeah, I'll say yesterday, City Council, there was a very, very vigorous discussion about storm resiliency at the County Commission on Wednesday. Not quite as much, but it was there as well. And I'll say, for whatever it's worth, obviously you guys have a lot more elected experience than I'll ever have, but I do think it's super important that this moment in time be a movement towards hardening the city towards storms in the future, as opposed to us brushing this off as if this were just a one-off or something we can forget about.
Well, I will tell you that when I was part of the damage assessment, or being damage assessment coordinator back in, I guess it was in the, when the heck was it, early 90s, I suppose, but that we, as part of that, the Department of Community Affairs, which still existed at the time, did a demonstration project. So there was a grant that we were part of, Hillsborough County was part of, that we did a hazard mitigation study. And I'd be interested in going back and looking at that study and seeing what of the things that were recommended from that have actually taken place, because it was scary when you started to see, you have a port, you have stacks of different types of material, hazardous materials that are stored there, petroleum products, you name it. That if we ever had the full effect of a storm like this, a Category 4, in addition to the flooding, what would be washed into the bay? What would what other? Because there's just a lot of other possible things. If you added on top of this, 140 mile an hour winds and copious amounts of rain, goodness gracious, what?
Yeah. Last week,
all of that's something to look at.
Yeah. Last week we had John Bennett on, the Chief of Staff, City of Tampa, and I mentioned to John, I said back in 2003, right around the time of Charlie and Francis and those storms, and everybody's talking about storm surge, I said, we need to paint on the telephone poles in the vulnerable areas what the storm surge looks like. So in other words, if driving at the corner, let's say, of Dale Mabry and Inner Bay down south on the peninsula, paint on a telephone pole and say, this is what a 6-foot storm surge will do. This is what a 10-foot storm surge will do. And if people see that every single day, maybe it will sink in terms of how bad things can be. Unfortunately, the powers to be did not agree with me. They said, oh, you're going to scare away tourists and you're going to scare people, and we don't want to scare people.
Well, I think, unfortunately, it's not just the surge itself, and then it's the tide and the waves on top of all of that. The power is just, it's remarkable. But we've had so many near misses, and then people are very protective, obviously, of their stuff, and they want to stay with their stuff, and they forget that their life is more important than their stuff. So, it's not easy. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to I know with my 14-year-old daughter, she's the one that if you tell the stove is hot, don't touch the stove. She's going to touch the stove and say, "Hey, it's hot. I told you it was hot." But that's the way she learns, and so many of us do. So, at this point, I think we learn from it and we recover, and hopefully we take some positive steps towards the future. But I think we all are aware that at some point our number is going to be called that we're going to get the full effect. And I don't know if you saw the satellite photograph of night photograph of the lights in Florida, and that swath up through Georgia.
Terrifying.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
No, I mean, big shout out to all the linemen out there. I mean, in all seriousness, like these are folks like all throughout the American Southeast that are like doing their damnedest to help people get power and safety back. I have a friend who is a lineman out in Polk County. I think he's up in Tennessee right now. Big shout out to all of those folks. I mean, like really, they're genuine. Them and the first responders who are helping folks really are heroes in the situation when we really need them.
And there's still people, I think, without power in and around the Bay Area. It's scattered.
Yeah.
And Duke and Tico are doing a good job of getting it back on. But
I'll say now would be a good time to start having conversations about undergrounding lines and building up our electrical grid resiliency. I mean, like this would be a really good time to start having that conversation because, again, this storm missed us. Debbie last year missed us, and yet we had very severe, electrical outages. Like,
if you're just tuning in, you're listening to WMNF. This is Down and Dirty. I'm John Dingfelder. Jason Marlowe has joined me, and we have Hillsborough County property appraiser Bob Enriquez, who is knowledgeable about everything. But especially,
I mean, literally, what do you need to know? Like tackle technique?
Do you need call my wife and tell her that?
There you go.
We will get Carrie on the phone in short order.
But Bob, on a serious note, have you been contacted or have you had conversations with any of the mayors in Hillsborough County or the city council members, to talk about, what is the impact going to be on local government? I know when I was on city council back in, when we did have Francis and Charlie and we had some significant impacts to our budget because when you adjust the property values, that adjusts the taxes that come to local government.
Just in generalities, there have been calls back and forth in which folks have talked about, how we're going to gather that information. I think that the it's not explicitly said, but I think that's what's in their mind when they make those calls. But again, it's kind of indeterminate at this point. I mean, and just in terms of raw numbers, if you were to say, let's say that number $2 billion, if that number verifies that we have $2 billion and market value lost. In theory, that would be about $40 million of lost revenue. But again, we don't know how much of that will be fixed before January 1st, and how and again, what you were saying in terms of the land values going down. In fact, I think there's an article. I want to say it's in the Times today that I read. And it's kind of a mixed bag. It all depends on the amount of damage. And you've also got a lot of investors and people sitting on money that are looking for places, and good, bad, or indifferent. Absent the terrible bucks lost last night, people are they want to come to they still want to come here, and they think it's a good place to invest. So there may be, in some cases, values that people will overpay for something that's damaged because if they're looking from up north or someplace else. So it's kind of hard to tell at this point. But I would say that if you wanted a very raw number, that's what we're looking at. Overall, assuming that $2 billion number, it's about $40 million. So that's significant.
Well, let's put it in context. What's the total assessed value in Hillsborough County right now as related to the $2 billion?
Gosh, I'm
drawing a blank.
I'm drawing a blank. I think it's about $290 billion.
I figured it was probably somewhere up in that. So the $2 billion is huge, but it still might only be about 1 or 2%.
Yes, yeah, and assuming next year the property values will continue to rise, and last year I will tell you the property values rose at the smallest overall amount since I've been in office, related to various different things, obviously interest rates and other things. But so we were assuming the values continue to rise, but not at the level they've risen over the past few years. Particularly 21 to 22, we had a 21% overall increase in property value. But you're still going to have 5 or 6% increase in overall property value, regardless of this. So in essence, you wouldn't necessarily lose revenue; you would just lose some percentage of the revenue additional revenue that you would have accrued next year because of rising property values overall.
If you're just tuning in, we got Bob Enriquez, Hillsborough County property appraiser. We only have a few more minutes. Jason?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on something that Coach said in relationship to today's Times article. It's entitled, How Will Hurricane Helene Reshape Tampa Bay's Housing Market? Honestly, a very, very, very good read. Props to the authors, Rebecca Leibson and Tegan Simonton. Genuinely good work. One of the things in there that I thought was really interesting in reflection to something that you said, Coach, was this quote from the mayor of Gulfport, Sam Henderson. Quote, "The price of repairs may mean we lose our character. There will be a different kind of people who can afford to live here moving forward." And as someone who's a fifth-generation Tampano, can you speak to how the storm could affect, to some extent, the culture of where people can afford to live?
Yeah, I think what they're speaking to is, and if you use Davis Island as an example, where you have a mixture of housing types, but certainly over the course of time, as people have come in and bought a piece of land, and built larger, taller, mansion type homes from the original ranch style 1-stories that are there. Certainly that over the course of time, the nature of the island has changed already. If you were in West Tampa along the river, there's homes that are that are older that again maybe give you some sense of place that's different than the more modern, taller homes. I think in the case of that article, what I've read was because there were areas, down in Southwest Florida, in which you had, older homes that maybe had certain character to them. That those aren't, it's difficult to build that same kind of housing stock when you're elevating it, X number of feet, and frankly, that's not necessarily what folks, coming to the area would want to build. They want to build something new that looks different. So,
because what we need is one more modern-looking McMansion. I don't think we have enough of those, and I think we need to just spread them like sunflower seeds.
Well, Bob Enriquez...
and I think, again, if you look at some areas of Seminole Heights and those kinds of things that John knows, having lived there, that if you're near the river, it's not likely that you're going to replace that same style home that was there. Now, in certain cases, you're covered by some kind of an overlay district that you have to be, you have to rebuild in some kind of character that's similar, but it's not like that everywhere.
Yeah. Lynn and I moved from South Tampa. We spent decades in South Tampa, and one of the reasons we moved up to Seminole Heights was to go from 8 feet above sea level to 35 feet above sea level. We're enjoying the heights. Bob Enriquez, we only have a minute or two, so tell folks what you've been doing and why they should possibly consider voting for you in a couple of weeks.
Well, what I've been doing is trying to do everything I can to help people recover here. And I want to again mention, get with us, go to our website at htpafl.org to report any damage. They can fill out the damage assessment form there. They can email us to helenedamage@hcpafl.org or call us at 813-272-6332, which is the damage reporting hotline. So I think, from the shameless political plug, just honestly, that I made a promise, and I've delivered on that promise over the last 12 years to rethink and reinvent our office, revitalize it, and we continue to do that. We've cut the budget 3 times during my tenure, and have always kept our budget increases to, less than inflation, and usually it's related to something that's passed on to us. It's not that we're doing anything that's not being a good steward of taxpayers' dollars. We're smaller, about 20% smaller in terms of overall number of employees, through attrition and retirement and that kind of thing. We're by utilizing technology, cross-training, and just smarter, being smarter.
Hey, listen, we appreciate all you do. We appreciate you calling in and Drive carefully as you're heading home.
We wanted to have Joshua Wolstall on, but we ran out of time. Have a great day, everybody.
All right, take care.
Take care, Bob. .org?
Yeah. Org.
88.5.
When you're